sunrise. A quiet, deserted beach on the northern coast of France. The nearby town of Verville-sur-Mer, still asleep, except for a few fishermen. It is almost impossible to imagine that little more than 60 years ago, this peaceful shoreline was the setting for the largest armed invasion in human history. More than 175,000 fighting men. What General Dwight Eisenhower would call a mighty host, swept ashore on the Normandy coast on June the 6th, 1944. This epic military assault would be called by its code name, Operation Overlord, but history would know it simply as D-Day.
The Allied invasion of Normandy was the largest military operation ever executed in military history. In terms of scope, you have over 1,200 combatant vessels supporting approximately 4,300 landing craft, which are going to ferry in the range of 250,000 men onto the beaches over the next 3 weeks.
Probably over 500,000 men engaged in either transporting these soldiers to the beaches or covering the beaches with overhead air cover, naval forces, land forces, logistics forces.
Looking back on it, now at the tender age of 78, I'm just so proud that I was a part of it, and I give praise to the man upstairs for seeing us through and coming out victorious.
I firmly believed then, and I do now, that God was on our side. We didn't start the war, they did, and they had to be stopped.
I felt God was watching us and telling us that it had to be done.
War is one of the necessary evils in our world, led by Satan and evil men. I say that war is hell any way you look at it.
I believe it had to be done, and we were the young people of that age that had to do it.
I don't think you should have war, but if you have to, do it and get it over with. And do it in the name of God in this country of ours.
I understand they're losing like 1,500 of us a day. That really gets my attention.
As the ranks of D-Day survivors are rapidly diminished, more and more veterans are coming forward to help preserve this historic event for generations to come. In New Orleans, Louisiana, several local veterans volunteer regularly at the National D-Day Museum.
Welcome to the D-Day Museum. Okay.
The only museum in America dedicated to the Normandy invasion. It is fittingly located in the city where thousands of Higgins boats were manufactured during the war. In fact, General Eisenhower himself credited the Higgins boat with winning the war.
The D-Day Museum is a celebration of one day, D-Day. That's all it's concerned with right now. All of our artifacts, all of our pictures, all of our stories are concerned with just D-Day. That thing was about this high and about that wide. The best part of my volunteering is that I get an opportunity to teach a little bit. I get an opportunity to pass on some information to younger people who don't know it.
Now, if he doesn't answer, we have the first floor, which has the tanks, jeeps, and the planes up in the ceiling. And the second, third, fourth floor has everything about D-Day and the war in Europe. And I don't go up there because it brings back too many memories.
Each summer, thousands flock to England's southern coast, which is dotted with popular resort areas. The town of Weymouth, in particular, is crowded with vacationers and tourists. But in the late spring of 1944, this charming seaport would be crowded with soldiers, tanks, and warships. Weymouth, along with other coastal cities like Plymouth and nearby Portsmouth, would become the debarkation sites of the Great Invasion.
I remember it so well in my mind. We were having dinner in our mess hall one evening, and in came the first sergeant, and he said, "All leaves are canceled for the night, and we want you to start turning in your uniforms after dinner this evening." Now, this was our first inkling that things were hot.
We were quarantined so that we wouldn't tip off the people in town that we were getting ready to leave. At that time, they changed our dog tags, removing our home addresses.
We felt like we were in a prison. Had these high bales of barbed wire and these rough-looking military policemen patrolling. We weren't allowed outside those fences.
Well, they told us we were going to the airport, and they told us what we had to take with us and what we had to pack and leave there. Then we all loaded on trucks, and we went out, I guess, about a week before actual D-Day.
And of course, when they made us put the stripes, the war paint on the airplanes, that was it.
And we drove to a place called Weymouth, and we boarded the Empire Javelin on 30 May 1944.
And we know this was it. We had a model of the beach. It showed all of the roads, contours, pillboxes.
And the boats were very uncomfortable, warm, and the fumes from the diesel engines came into the holes that we were in and almost asphyxiated us.
We had to take out all the fresh water, all the fuel, that we could just enough to get over there and back again.
As we told what our business was, what our duty was to be done, you could see on the people's face that this was the real thing.
We knew it was going to be an invasion. We didn't know where. Never heard of Normandy until D-Day.
Did you see this display they put up here for you? Sure did.
Lieutenant Colonel George Russell Barbour began his military career serving with the 11th Horse Cavalry in 1941. He was the youngest chaplain then on active duty in the Army. Now, at the age of 90, Barbour enjoys a peaceful retirement in Whittier, California.
Everybody's all right at home, you know.
Well, 10 years ago, the Army Public Relations Department here in Southern California, they put out a call for a chaplain who had landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. I was the only one who responded. It was then I found out that I was the last living chaplain that landed on the beach on D-Day.
Barbour's goal in life has always been to lead people to a relationship with God. And never before was that goal so urgent, or the message so readily received, as it was on D-Day.
On the Sunday before D-Day, I held services on 11 different ships in Weymouth Harbor. Thousands and thousands of soldiers in those services.
We had a communion service in which everybody participated in, and it was in the mess hall, but right then it was a temple.
I had done my prayer, made my peace with my Maker, and one of the biggest things I asked for was to be able to hold my hand up. I wanted to do what I was supposed to do without any problems.
And we're praying to God to give us good weather so our ships can sail and our planes can fly. So they can bomb and destroy those people that are out there to oppose us in our landing. And somehow, it didn't seem right to pray to God to kill people.
This particular chaplain, I don't remember his name, but he emphasized that the enemy was wicked and we were going into a noble cause.
So I turned around and I prayed. that God would help us all, friend and foe alike, through this big ordeal that we're going to face in the morning.
And sunrise on our paid us a visit down there on first the night we jumped, you know.
He was just saying to the groups what he wanted us to do, and he wanted us to remember that we were fighting for a cause.
He knew that some of us would lose our lives, and he said, I want to apologize for it right now. But he said, I hope and pray none of you do.
The beautiful Airborne and Special Operations Museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina, is a testament to the men and women who have served our country, both in battle and in times of peace, from the air. Not surprisingly, particular attention is devoted to the exploits of the 82nd and the 101st Airborne Divisions in World War II. Appropriately, the museum's motto is, "The legend continues." Only a few miles from the museum in Rayford, North Carolina, Carl Beck certainly embodies the spirit of these words. As a member of the 101st Airborne Division on D-Day, Beck knows firsthand what it's like to land behind enemy lines. And at the age of 78, he's still jumping out of airplanes.
You just get a fire in your belly, and it's just something you have to do. And you're looking over the engine, and you just let go. It's the euphoria when you let go, and you can see that airplane pulling away from you. Man, it is just a thing of beauty.
While skydiving today is all about fun, it was the call of duty that compelled Beck to jump on June the 6th, 1944.
The night of June 5th, we loaded the airplanes, which had been drilled into us. It was a double daylight saving time, therefore you can still see the airplanes taking off.
We took off at 10 minutes before midnight of the 5th, so we would be there long before daylight with our paratroopers to drop in behind the lines.
The airborne troops' mission was to fly around like that and come in from the backside and land within a couple of 3 miles of the beach on the front side and prevent the Germans from sending any reinforcements up to the beach.
I could see a cigarette glowing here and there when somebody'd light up because they were nervous. But other than that, the cockpit, the inside where we were, was completely black.
Some people try to sleep. That was obviously impossible, but at least they got some rest. Some people get very talkative. Some people have to relieve themselves. Some people throw up. So it's a mess inside the plane.
Everybody was afraid. We were young and macho. We thought we were invincible.
I think every man in that plane was thinking about God and about life and about death.
In my mind was, God, take care of my family, because I do want to see them back again. And take care of my buddies and myself as we jump.
We didn't have a public prayer going across in the plane, but after I got through praying, looking around at the other guys, I could tell what they were doing. And I really believe that that's the only reason I'm here today, that due to the prayer that we all had.
We caught a break in the clouds, and the pilot said, "Look down," over the loudspeaker. My God, you could look like you could have walked from England to France. We were crossing the Armada. It was a magnificent sight.
As we approached the coast, the 20-millimeter fire was just devastating. It's beautiful, but it's lethal.
It looked like flying into a 4th of July celebration with all the stuff coming up to greet us.
I was afraid that our tow plane was going to blow up because the fire was going right through him.
he lost his instruments. He went underneath the other planes, and then I had to get down into the prop wash to stay low enough to stay out of these other airplanes.
The problem with dropping parachute-borne infantry is they generally don't have heavy weapons with them, and they have only a limited ability to sustain themselves on the ground without reinforcement. So it was necessary to bring in heavier equipment, and the idea of towing gliders over the target and releasing the gliders and letting the gliders then bring that equipment in was born. This was a huge effort, and young men were trained to fly these things that had marginal aerodynamic characteristics at best.
They employed a coffin building company to build gliders. So it got around among a lot of us that we were flying coffins.
We were really sitting ducks. And these hedgerows down below, if we flew over one hedgerow, then we were ideal target for the Germans who were over on the next hedgerow.
One time, when the tracers started coming up between the glider and the tow plane, they were shooting straight up, and I was right in line. If I would have continued on that course, I would have been taken out.
I was a jump master, and I was very intensely trying to follow the ground places that we knew we were using for checkpoints, and we hit all the checkpoints right so far. And then we passed the river that I was supposed to use as a checkpoint, the Douve River, and I knew we were very near the drop zone.
You're sitting there, and our jump master says, "Stand up, hook up."
Check equipment. I checked the man in front of me. The man behind me checked mine, right on down the line.
And then he'll say, "Stand in the door." So the first man swings out, and then when everybody closes up behind him.
A green light turns on at the door.
The jump master says, "Go." The first man goes. Everybody else is supposed to follow, and they're supposed to follow real fast.
We could jump 22 men in 11 seconds. I was second in line, but the boy in front of me got hit before he even went out the plane. I pushed him out of the plane, and he was already dead.
We were supposed to jump at 800 feet. They jumped us at 400 feet. So you don't have much time to think going down. At 400 feet, it takes 186 feet for your parachute to open and fold up.
I had 2 tracer bullets that went through my chute when I was coming down, and there's 11 bullets between each tracer.
I could see that all this land below was flooded with water. But when I landed in a churchyard in a small tree.
And as I came down, we were taught to lock our feet together so nothing could come up between our legs. And I hit some taut wires, unbeknowing at that time that it was what they call Rommel's asparagus. And it flipped me backward and busted my chin strap, and I was unconscious about 6 hours.
Well, I checked my legs to see if they were still there, and there nothing broken. And you know, those are automatic things you do, as you're taught to do in parachute training.
I did not know that my neck at that time was broken. I had what they call a Jefferson fracture.
When we hit the ground, we wanted to find out who was our buddies and who was the enemy. So we used the cricket, and one snap of the cricket would say it was an American.
We saw a guy moving around through the brush over there, and one of the boys cricked a cricket at him. And he said, don't shoot, I lost my cricket."
I found another one of my buddies that had his leg broke, and I gave him my last shot of morphine. They gave us 1 shot of morphine, and I used it on him and took his gun and put it in his arms and everything, propped him up against a tree, and I left him there, and I never saw him anymore.
Yeah, we often talk about the fog and friction of war. These elements tend to be exacerbated in the air and in the confusion of night. The long and the short of it is, American paratroopers were scattered across the peninsula.
We landed right on top of the Germans, and it confused them. And It was two sides confused, and nobody knew what was going on. But being trained to be airborne troops, we had been taught, and in case that happens, you gather up in bunches, and the highest ranking officer in each group take charge.
The 82nd, being a combat experienced unit, was given, I think, the more difficult mission. It was to screen the 101st against possible German reinforcements that were further north in the Cotentin Peninsula. The 101st had a series of objectives laid out to take control of the causeway exits from the beach and make it possible for the 4th Infantry Division, when it came ashore at Utah, to get into the Cotentin Peninsula.
Our job was to jump at the La Barquette Dam.
We had been tasked to get the locks and to get the bridges. The locks to control the river height so that we could maintain it at a flood level.
If they had blown that dam, the water would have come over Utah Beach.
The 82nd's objective for everything was the town of St. Mary Glees, which encompassed 7 road junctions, Chef de Pont Bridge, and La Fure Bridge, which would keep the Germans from reinforcing Utah. But first we had to find out where we were. We finally ran across a road junction that said St. Mary Glees, I don't know, 8 or 9 kilometers part of the way, so we knew where we were then.
Daylight comes very early over there, and about daylight I hit the main highway. There I met another lieutenant from my outfit who'd been in headquarters company with me, and I told him what the mission was, and we started down the road.
We knocked over 2 big German CPs and killed 32 Germans. And we didn't lose one, not even one got a scratch that I know of. So that's where I got my Distinguished Service Medal from.
Now, we had direct orders that the first 10 days we take no prisoners. I always hoped God understood that, because we had no way to take care of them.
We crawled from yard to yard, taking the town of St. Marie Glees and clearing it out.
And we held that town. We was there, I think, 3 days. We got down because we were trying to cut that road, down the beach. Not the guys get a foothold down on Normandy.
We got Cherbourg, we got the river lines, we crossed the river lines, we accomplished our missions, we took the bridges, we pushed across the river, captured the town of Carentan, which was the link between Utah Beach and Omaha Beach.
Not long ago, I got a letter from a guy there in St. Marie Glees, and they still think a lot of us and what we did for those people there that night.
As the vast armada made its way across the English Channel, the Supreme Allied Commander rallied this mighty host of soldiers, sailors, and airmen to embark upon the Great Crusade. The eyes of the world are upon you, he told them. The hopes and prayers
of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. And let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
2 o'clock in the morning, they drop anchor. Total darkness. 2:30 in the morning, it's away all boats.
You could not pull a destroyer up to the shore and offload troops. You needed very specialized boats and ships to do this.
The boat was called an LCVP, Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel, which meant that I could take in the way of personnel 36 men, or in the vehicle department, it'd be something like a small Jeep or the cannon that one might tow behind a Jeep.
There were other amphibious vessels that carried troops, LCIs, and carried other tanks, LCTs. These were smaller amphibious vessels.
I was an ensign as second officer aboard a landing craft tank, LCT 540. She could deliver 6 Sherman tanks to the beach.
These boats were on deck for fast deployment. And once being put over the side, we would fall off into a formation off the bow of the ship.
So the objective was very clear. 1 trip to the beach and successfully debark the troops.
On the morning of June 6, about 3 or 4 a.m., we were awakened, given breakfast.
On the ship before we went over the side, I called the whole ship to prayer with a loudspeaker, see. And those men bowed their heads, some took their helmets off, and we had prayer that God would lead us and guide us and give us victory.
My prayer was the Our Father. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still water.
By the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all his evil spirits, who wander through the world for the ruin of souls.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadows of death, I shall fear no evil.
For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. And that's a good prayer. It's a solid prayer.
And we climbed the rope ladders down to the landing craft, the Higgins boats.
And the water was so rough, the Higgins boat was just flopping up and down. And if you miss your footing on that first go, well, then you went between the ship and that boat, and there was no return there.
So there we were in these boats being thrown around like matchsticks, and the boat started to fill up with water. The bilge pumps couldn't hold the water and the vomiters from some of the men being seasick, so we bailed out with our helmets to stay afloat.
The water was pretty rough. A high sea was running. It was cold, it was rainy, it was miserable. And the run from the mothership you were on to the shore was about 2 hours. That's how far out they were, 12 miles away. And there's a lot of firing.
In the quiet Normandy village of Saint-Marie-du-Mont, there is a street named Allée Angelos Chatas, over 3,000 miles away in Dallas, Texas. An 82-year-old veteran worships in a Greek Orthodox ceremony. His name, Angelos Chatas. He is recognized by the citizens of this French village as the first Allied soldier to set foot on Utah Beach. A man of faith, Chatas always senses the presence of God in times of crisis. And God's presence was never felt more powerfully than on that day.
Our units were naval combat demolition units. We had to precede the first wave. To clear these paths, we had to do our mission so they could get on the beach. The logic there, or the concept, was to get a small knit unit that could function like a single organism.
They had a lot of these things sticking out in the waters, so that some of them had called telemines, that anti-tank mines on the end of them, that the ships would be underwater and they hit them.
There was one obstacle that the Germans had conceived called the Belgian Gate that was particularly difficult to eliminate. It was made out of angle iron and flat iron, 6-inch by 6-inch, 3/4-inch thick.
The Germans had another weapon in their arsenal, and that was the sea mine. They sowed the waters approaching Normandy with thousands of sea mines. So those were lethal threats to the Allied naval vessels, from battleships down to the smallest landing craft.
We had landed on the beach a little before the first wave. According to French observers, they spotted me and said I was the first one to land there. And anyway, I accepted that honor, and they gave me a special medal for it.
We was way down from where I was supposed to come in, and I just got behind a sunken barge, and I took my waterproofing off my mine detector and started crawling down a retaining wall. going back down to where I was supposed to go at that D1 exit there at Dog Green at Omaha Beach, next to the cliffs.
It was utter chaos. Somehow, though, there was a semblance of order in the thing. We proceeded to do our job, and there were difficulties in this. There was, of course, enemy fire.
The commanding officer of this unit, Lieutenant Commander Gibbons, said it was horrendous what his men had to do. They had huge losses, but they got the job done. They cleared 50-yard lanes through these obstacles so the boats could then make it through to the beach. And he said of his men that they died with their face toward the enemy.
Omaha Beach received the brunt of German resistance. The crescent-shaped beach made incoming forces vulnerable to fire from all sides. To escape the beach, troops had two choices. They could head for one of the 5 exit pathways called draws that led to the surrounding villages. The draws were heavily fortified with mines and gun emplacements. Or they could scale the steep, rocky cliffs surrounding the beach, which would place them directly below enemy fire. More than 2,400 soldiers died on Omaha Beach. But by day's end, they would manage to land 34,000 others.
Then the closer we got to the beach, we passed wreckage, we passed bodies. We get closer and closer, and people in very small boats, so they called ducks the Army had, they would go on land or in the water. But they're very unstable, and the wind was blowing now. And some of those just toppled over.
A lot of the kids that went into the water, they didn't have their CO2 cartridges high enough, and the weight was too much. And when they went into the water, they went down head first, and they never came up.
And it was like a merry-go-round. You'd have several craft up at shore. When they unloaded, if they could, they moved out and went around a circle, and they went to another ship, loaded up, and made a circle and came around back, unload. So it was just a continuous circle.
The boat on our left blew up, and we were showered with wood, metal, and body parts. That reduced our number to 180.
We come under some heavy fire, and you looked at the beach when we landed. You saw the dead and dying, and there was no advance. They didn't get off the beach that first wave.
Everybody was scared. Everybody was scared. Some of them were crying, and I could see some of them sat down on the barge and couldn't get them up. They were frightened. Of course, I tried to help them. Come on, get up. This is going to be easy. It's going to be a piece of cake.
You never knew when the next shell was going to be the one that hit you.
Omaha was the toughest beach for a number of reasons. We had, in the first wave, the 1st Infantry Division and the 29th Infantry Division. The 1st Infantry Division had gone ashore in North Africa in 1942, had fought its way across to beat the Africa Corps in the early 1943, and then had taken part in the invasions of Sicily and Italy. So it was a very well experienced, very hardened unit. The 29th had never been in combat before. It was a National Guard division from Virginia and Maryland. Had been in England since early '42, but had not been in combat. And so this was their baptism of fire.
When our ramp went down, it was a signal for every machine gun on that beach, and there were a lot of them, to open up on the exit to our little boat.
As the men come out of the boat, the machine guns was zeroed in on the front of the boats, and it was just knocking them off one at a time.
It was like a river of blood. Everything was so red. I almost panicked when I saw that, but I held my composure.
And then I remember dropping on the ground and crawling for a good ways.
I ran to a object that they had put out there with looked like steel rails, and I fell down behind that, and I wasn't on the beach 5 minutes before I got hit. In less than 10 minutes, all the men on my boat was either killed or wounded as they come off the boat.
An 88 millimeter shell went off in front of me and hit me square in the face, and it felt like a baseball bat hitting me in the face. The cheek was blown off. The roof of my mouth was torn away. I had teeth and gums laying on my tongue. Of course, I was bleeding profusely.
The beaches, I never seen such a mess in my life. Now, 8 Company that morning we went in had 170 men. 91 got killed within about 20 minutes. 60 some was wounded, and only about 15 was able to continue the fight.
When I got to the wall made out of stone along the edge of the beach, and as I sat there, we had been given a little New Testament, and I pulled it out and started thumbing through it, and all the pages were so stuck together and soaking wet. But as I thumbed through it, I found one page that had a dry spot on it. It was Hebrews 12:13. And as I read it, I knew God had his hand on me the whole way.
I was watching the 116 going in, and believe me, it's something I'll never forget as long as I live. They were being slaughtered. I guess that's why they call it Bloody Omaha.
I finally got to the wall, and a lot of the wounded were up at that wall. But in the meantime, there was other ones out there that you could see that weren't even moving.
Some of them were hollering for their mothers, and they were hollering medics and everything like that.
Up until the beach, I'd never really seen anyone that was ever badly hurt in any way, shape, or form. My specialty was blisters, and this was on-the-job training.
We used plenty of sulfonilamide, passed it up as good as we could, and then carried them back to an aid station.
But in the meantime, I began to run out of medical equipment. I was taking the stuff off of the fellas that were wounded. I'd say, you have to give me your aid kit.
And who we could patch up, we patched up. Who we could save, we saved.
The medics paid no attention to what was going on. All they wanted to do was to take care of the wounded. And I just absolutely marveled at how they were so brave. And yet, all they were doing was tending to the wounded.
Perhaps the most distinctive and imposing feature of the entire Normandy coastline is the infamous Pointe Du Hoc. This 100-foot cliff was a ready-made fortress from which the Germans could wreak havoc on both Omaha and Utah beaches. Heavily surrounded by machine guns, mines, and barbed wire, there was only one way to infiltrate this critical enemy target. The Germans believed it was not humanly possible to climb Pointe Du Hoc. The Rangers would prove them wrong.
At Omaha Beach, 3 companies of the 2nd Ranger Battalion were employed specifically to support the landings by taking out some artillery pieces just prior to the actual assault landings going in.
We all was feeling pretty good after we hit land. And then the Germans started raking us with machine guns. We killed a lot of our guys. Then we started shooting grappling hooks with a rope tied down to it and hoping that they would catch on to something up there.
We had to use Bangalore torpedoes ourselves to blow up them the barbed wire pieces so we could get through there.
When we get there, they're waiting for us up there to cut our ropes, drop boulders on us, shoot us off the rope.
We didn't know which rope was going to cut, but we kept climbing. I said, when bullets were flying around here, you know you could climb fast.
That was our objective. Take Pointe Du Hoc, first thing, find the guns and destroy them or render them inoperable, because they could be responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths on Omaha Beach or any beach, the Allied beaches.
When the Rangers finally scaled the cliffs and got to the top, they found that the emplacements were empty. Instead of cannons, they found telephone poles sticking out of the embrasures as a deception plan. And so, being good Rangers, they immediately remembered the commander's intent and fanned out across the area. And First Sergeant Leonard Lommel found the 4 guns in an orchard about a kilometer south of the initial position.
With our good luck, we found them and rendered them inoperable, put them out of action by 8:30 that morning. We were the first mission accomplished on D-Day.
I was hit a couple of times. Sergeant Wood looked over and he says, "Lieutenant, you've been hurt." I said, "Yes, Sergeant Wood." "Get on my back," he says. So I crawled up on the rock wall and got over on his back, and he carried me piggyback all the way out there, just 400 to 600 yards, I would say, and let me down very lightly. And I never saw Sergeant Wood again after that.
Seeing combat dead for the first time is a major culture shock for American kids who had never been in combat.
Finally got on shore, and men dying all around me, and I was talking to them, praying with them, and loving them, and telling them that God's going to be with us whatever happens.
When the tanks came in, they were riding right over the bodies of our soldiers. That hurt me more than anything that I saw.
And suddenly I come to about, I'd say 20-some bodies. They're Rangers, but they were Rangers from my company, and that makes it a little bit different. And of course they had blood and dust and everything in their beards and in their hair. They're dead. And I said, "What are you doing? Get up." I couldn't believe that they couldn't do that.
The smell of death was terrible, and the smell of the gunfire was just devastating. It was terrible. I'll never forget the smell.
It was kind of like being locked into a dream, and your mind just could absorb it. With just hundreds of bodies.
The first thing I saw was 2 American soldiers who had apparently been hit by a 120 millimeter mortar or an artillery shell, and their 4 feet were all broken or separated from the bodies. But in their dying moments, they put their arms around each other and died in a ritual of death.
The manner of death varied all over the place, and you just had to suck it up and say, you know, I'm going to continue, never mind looking at somebody with their legs blown off.
I remember saying to God in a loud voice, "God, if you'll get me off this beach, I'll do anything in my life that you want me to do." And he answered my prayers, just like that.
I understand that one of the 1st Division commanders said that there's 2 groups of people on this beach. The dying and those who are going to die. So get off, get moving.
By evening fall, you've got tanks burning, you've got oil burning, you've got smells like you couldn't believe. It's just a smoke of oil, wall of fire coming across the beach. The bodies are beginning to wash up.
That night, after the 3rd run to the beach, I realized that I was wrung out. I was scared to death, and I hadn't eaten, and I couldn't eat.
Come 11 o'clock at night, I realized I couldn't get over that 100-foot cliff. So I began to dig my own foxhole right up next foot of the cliff there. And I prayed as if everything depended upon God, and I dug as if everything depended upon me.
I went back to my foxhole. I was putting on the black stuff, you know, to keep your face from glaring. And I just asked God to help me. The image of Christ came on that foxhole as clear as I'm looking at you, said, go, you'll come back.
And something made me kneel down, and I felt God's presence, and a great calm sort of came over me. And I felt that everything was going to be all right.
I said, Lord, you have to help me, because I can't do it myself. So I think God looked down and said, well, Larry, have mercy on you, because I survived.
Just wherever you was at, why, you had a little prayer service. And you sit on your helmet, or, you know, and then have a little prayer service.
Unfortunately, in our division, we didn't have a Jewish chaplain. If we needed to see a chaplain, we would go to the Protestant chaplain or the Catholic chaplain.
I went to talk to the priest one night as I went to confession, and as I committed a murder. He says, what do you mean you committed murder? I says, I shot somebody. Who? I was a German. You didn't commit murder. That's the facts of war. He says, okay. He goes all right after that.
You know, there was an old expression, there's no atheist in foxholes. I believe that.
I was saved there on D-Day.
That was a long night, and I was very glad when the sun came up.
The following morning, hundreds of us got out of these little foxholes. We've got rifles that we're using as crutches. We've got anything we can find, and we walked down the beach to the D3 draw.
And that's where A Company came in, right there. And there were so many bodies were all down there.
You say to yourself, my God, how will they ever clear this up? How will they ever move anything? Bulldozers were on the beach trying to move bodies aside, and I mean, it was tough watching that. And they just took, you know, bulldozer and scraped bodies right off the edge of the beach and tried to put them in a pile.
I was sent out with a carrier to pick up some bodies. And I took one look at their boots and one look at their helmet, and I'd say to one of the new reinforcements, throw a gas cape over them and throw them and put them in the truck. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at him because I was afraid I would see somebody that I knew very well. I knew his family. I'd been in his house. No, I couldn't do it.
1,531 of my men died that day on the beach, you see. So we had to bury those men, you see. So I went with a team of people to pick the location for the cemetery overlooking the beach there. And we began to bury our dead.
Bedford, Virginia was a small farming community with a population of about 3,000 in 1944. Like most towns across America, Bedford sent many of its young men off to war. But unlike the others, the Bedford boys were destined for Company A of the 116th Regiment of the Army's 29th Infantry Division, the first to land on Omaha Beach. This tiny town in the Blue Ridge Mountains lost 19 men on D-Day and 3 others in the days immediately following, the highest per capita loss in America. Today, Bedford remains largely unchanged. It is still a small, friendly, tight-knit community. And now it is also the proud home of the National D-Day Memorial, which honors every soldier who died on D-Day. It's here that Roy Stevens, one of only 8 Bedford survivors from Company A, remembers the day he lost his twin brother, Ray.
As we were looking, checking it out, and we looked down, there was the cemetery. They was burying the soldiers down there. And we walked down to the cemetery. The first cross I came to was my brother's grave. I remember he had a little piece of dirt on it, and I knocked it off. It was dog tags, and it was his. I couldn't believe that. I just couldn't believe that this was him. Bedford was a small town, and everybody knew everybody, and everybody was almost kin to one another. It was a great little town.
And when we found out that the 29th Division was involved in the invasion, the churches here opened for prayer, and I think they were overflowing.
Elizabeth Tay, she worked at the telegraph office, and they started coming in about 2 weeks after they landed. She was the one that was carrying the sheriff and different ones, the undertakers.
We got our first telegram on July the 16th. It was on a Sunday, and we were getting ready to go to church.
And my mother, I remember when she got hers, she was hurt very much, she was very bad. Because when I came home, I met her on the sidewalk, and she just grabbed me and said, "At least one of you come back." My daddy was standing behind her, and I never seen him cry, but it was the first time.
And the local sheriff, Mr. Jim Marshall, was a friend of my father's, and he brought the first telegram, which said that the War Department regrets to inform you that your son, Bedford T. Hoback, has been killed in action. So the next day, my sister and brother and I thought we'd make our parents feel better, and we'd make some homemade strawberry ice cream. And we were in the basement trying to make the ice cream, and the second telegram was delivered saying my younger brother, Raymond, was missing in action.
It's like a veil of tears hanging over the town when they received those telegrams coming back in.
I think that the community is very proud of what these men did. Even though we have a hurt in our heart, we also are proud of our men who served.
And someone asked me one time, if they had to go again, would they do it? I say, I'm sure they would. Sure they would.
When I came home from World War II, I just wanted to get on with my life. I wanted to advance my education. I wanted to get married.
I tried to forget all about that, and I worked at putting it out of my mind.
Finally, about the 40th anniversary, I got to realize that that was a part of my life.
When I think about the guys that the real heroes are still over there in France that didn't receive that in 60 years, it hurts me bad that I got what they couldn't have.
So there's no reason why I ever should be here. And I really believe that someone was watching over me. And I always believe that.
The only reason we could come up with, it was our time. And he may have had something for us to do here before that time was up.
As I look back on these great veterans of the Second World War, I see Americans from every walk of life, from every race, every background, every educational level, every social economic level, and I see them thrown together in an extraordinary period in American history, some with lots of training, some with minimum training, but they all clearly understood the task that faced them, and in this extraordinary times, called upon to do extraordinary things, they reacted in extraordinary ways.
We didn't think ourselves as heroes. We just thought about we had a job to do and we was going to do it.
I got a lot of medals. I got every medal, combat award except the Medal of Honor. I mean, but hey, to give your life, that's the ultimate hero.
The heroes are some of the 9,400 that are at Corville.
None of us are heroes. They're right out here, under those white crosses.
If you put a 19-year-old American on a landing craft that's bobbing up and down 6 to 12 feet in a gale force swell, and you say, go hit that beach that's defended by someone who wants to shoot and kill you, and they do it, I don't know how much more you need to add before you get to the definition of hero.
The price they paid is beyond compare. We left so many good friends there. When the great jumpmaster says stand up, hook up, stand in the door, we'll meet our buddies on heaven's shore.